And welcome to episode 2 of our podcast. You may not agree with us,
but
I'm Lowery.
And I'm Eric Thomas.
And we welcome you in. Tonight's podcast is brought to you by Modley's Plumbing and Heating. You can dial up Modley's at 304-253-HELP. And Eric, one thing for sure, you never know when you need a plumber till you need a plumber, and Modley's is the one to call.
Well, I'm thinking Modley's listened to this last week and they thought they'd help us out and really give us some backing. But we appreciate everyone who viewed it last week, and we hope we can bring you some quality entertainment this week.
Well, we hope to be informative and entertaining. And first of all, we can be informative by recapping the games that were played. So the first full week of college is in the books, high school's in the books, and we'll start with high school football in 4A. Beckley, a tough win on the road. They beat Washington after making that long trip, 17-10 in overtime. And Eric, Washington with a chance to win the game, barely misses a 43-yard field goal as time expires, and Beckley able to win it in overtime.
And that showed some grit by the Beckley team. And we thought going into it, a long trip like that, with breaking in a new quarterback, and I think it was a big win for this Beckley team and a big boost in confidence to go on the road and get this victory.
Yeah, and it was a battle. They were up 10-0. Washington came back, tied the game at 10, and like I said, Washington with a chance to win the game on the final play just comes really short of missing a field goal, and then Beckley able to seize the moment in overtime.
Yeah, and I think the thing that really carried Beckley on the evening, special teams, they were strong in special teams, making a 24-yard field goal of their own to go up 10-7 in the second quarter. And the thing that stood tall, 20 snaps by Washington in the Beckley red zone, and I'm unable to come up with scores in that. And A.J. Thomas came up big with 2 key interceptions to help seal the victory.
Yeah, big play by Beckley. And like you said, their special teams, they made a field goal and 2 extra points, and a big win for Coach Surratt starting his 9th season.
Yeah, and a big win on the road, and as they travel on the road again this weekend.
In the AAA division, Shady, not the fortunes they were looking for. Coach Colacerto opening up the year on the road at Roan. And we said last week how good Roan was, and Roan takes it to Shady 36-12.
Yeah, and this Roan team, if I want to say one thing to Shady, don't panic. Roan County is going to get a lot of W's this year. We were confident that, in what we saw on the team the last 2 years that we covered them. So I think Shady will bounce back and really try to get a few wins.
In Class AA, one of the wildest games that we watched was Independence in Hoover, as Hoover won that game 37-30. And Eric, you and I watched a little bit of that together. And of course, they had the delay. The game was supposed to kick off at 7. then they pushed it back to 8. Then it didn't start till almost 10. They had that big weather delay. Then toward the end of the game, the fog was moving in. You couldn't see anything, and it was a battle back and forth. Independence had led 30-15, but then Hoover come back and wins the game 37-30.
Yeah, and Hoover really gutted that one out. And Independence, I thought they really had their foot on the gas, had all the momentum, and Hoover was able to come back and squeak the victory out. But saw a lot of positives for the Independence Patriots in that. Silas Nelson was amazing and big on both sides of the ball. Had a key pick 6 as he was able to jump a route and score, and really ran the ball effectively for the Patriots.
Yeah, that interception was almost at 90 yards, and then their freshman quarterback, Brock Green, I thought played really well.
Yeah, and the thing you know about these young players now, I mean, Brock Green has played a lot of football, and you can tell he's been around, his grandfather and his uncle. They all play football, and his father, and it really showed. He had a lot of poise, ran that offense, and I look for big things out of Brock.
And then the game you and I did down at Glen Daniel, we did it on video productions. We had almost 1,000 people that watched that game Friday. Was Polk at Liberty 34-8. And for the ones who didn't watch, and Eric, you were right on the money. When the game started, the first play from scrimmage, Polka has a false start. So they back them up 5. It's 1st and 15. They have another false start. They back them up. It's 1st and 20. Then they look like they're coming up to the line. They look confused, and they call a timeout. And you made the comment during the broadcast, what a good timeout. It's football. Settle in. And then when they finally, the first play from scrimmage, 1st and 20, they throw a touchdown pass, and then it was clean selling the rest of the way.
Yeah, and I think the coach did a great job of recognizing on the road, go ahead and burn this timeout. And after they scored, I mean, it was a hard-fought game for the Liberty Raiders, though. Final score doesn't indicate how. I mean, it was a closely contested game, back and forth, hard hitting. I mean, both of those teams really brought it Friday night.
Yeah, people say, how could 34-8 be closer? But I agree with you, and I made that comment during the course of the game. In fact, Liberty got stopped on the goal line. They had a couple other opportunities, and as we both know, the game was marred with flag after flag after flag.
Yeah, typical of most first games, though. And most coaches say you make your biggest jump from the first game to the second. And we're fortunate enough to have Liberty again this weekend. And I'd like to see if they can clean up those penalties, they'll have a shot at winning Friday night.
Now we took a look at week 2, and we look at the classes in Class 4A, and you mentioned it earlier. Beckley on the road again against their arch rival. Beckley will take on Greenbrier East. Greenbrier East is coming off a 24-20 victory over Riverside. East has beaten Beckley 3 of the last 4 times they've played up at Greenbrier East.
Yeah, and anytime you go on the road, Greenbrier East, the whole town is going to be there. Half the town of Beckley will drive up the interstate and make the trip. And I know things are really heating up via the the internet.
Yes.
My daughter goes to school there, so I get a chance to get a bird's eye view of what both schools are saying about it. So tune into that one.
Well,
folks.
all the talk will be done on the field. And, you and I did the game last year. Remember, Beckley got off to a big lead, and then Greenbrier East came back, and Beckley had to hold them off from East coming back to win the game.
And that's the thing that I think if you're Beckley, you should be concerned with, because Greenbrier East quarterback, they switched their offense up, and he really lit the secondary up. So the guys from Beckley better be up to task to defend the pass. It seems that they're real good against the run right now. So if you can get that secondary intact, you'll have a good chance to win it fairly.
Yeah, one thing that I think is positive for both teams is that they're both coming in this game with a win. They're both 1-0, trying to go 2-0. And for Greenbrier East, you're playing a 4A team. Of course, East slid down to AAA. So this is a really, it's a huge game all the way around. Maybe more huge for East because it's home and they are AAA Beckley's 4A.
Yeah, and you're talking about a bonus point right there. But if you're Beckley, it's a rivalry. They don't care if they're going across town to play marbles against Greenbrier East. They want to get the win.
So Independence trying to get their first win of the season. They take a long trip, 5.5 hours up to Brook. Brook lost last week. They lost to Beaver, local Ohio, 35-0. So John Lilly and the team, they might have to leave Thursday night to get up there in time. It's a 7 o'clock kickoff. Beckley at Brook. I was there one time when your nephew was the quarterback at Beckley.
He got drilled.
He got drilled. Your wife, Regina, never lets me forget that for making that comment on the radio. But one thing, they treated Beckley well other than on the field. Of course, your nephew, J.C. Pennington, he had a long touchdown run in that game. But that was my only time there. And what a beautiful facility up at Brook. But it is a long trip, and Independence coming off that tough loss, have an extra day to prepare. Brook, like I said, didn't score last week. So Independence ready to make this long trip to take on Brook.
And I think this is a battle-tested coaching staff with the young team that was battle-tested. Independence will be up for the battle. Brook Bruins, man, if you can remember, they challenged for what's now the 4A AAA championship with a bunch of good teams, in the mid 2000s, and they've kind of fallen on hard times. But I guarantee you they'll be ready for the Independence Patriots.
If you remember, and I think this was in 2011 when that fight broke out with South Charleston.
Yeah, they're the only team
they lose it twice. Yes.
Yes.
Brook, and that hadn't been 2013, a little less than 10 years ago, or a little more than 10 years ago, give or take. I can't remember exactly what year that was.
Yeah, because I can't either. But I remember the game was under protest right from after the fight. But yeah, I think Brook will be ready, but this will be another good test for this Independence Patriot team.
Then we look at Shady. They're going to be taking on Jameson Road. And Jameson Road lost to a good Wheeling Central team, 28-6. And we talked about Wheeling Central. They made that long trip to Jameson Road. They're going to play Midland Trail in the middle of the season, and they're going to play Shady at the end of the season. And you stated last week, which was correct, which I agree. You got a good team when you're going to take them long bus rides and you're going to play for pizza, right?
Yeah, and coaches also know it. Anytime a coach calls you up and says, hey, you got an open day, we have an open day, fill us in, we'll play. And hey, don't worry about it. Just give us some pizza. Our boys just love to play football.
But what's special to me about this, back in the day, Shady and Peterstown always played the first game of the season. And I was a part of this rivalry, and I played against a player, Steve Newberry, that went on to play at WU in room with Rich Rodriguez and play for the Dallas Cowboys. Yeah. And he's one of my friends that runs a dealership in Harrisburg. But him and I have become friends. So now, James and Road and Shady, I'm glad they're playing.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that, folks. Maris has a picture of him tackling Steve
I do.
Newberry.
Actually, I showed that. I took that down to Steve Newberry and actually showing me, actually spearing him. I put my helmet in his rib.
Yes, it's pretty funny. I like to jab him about that.
But
yeah.
anyway, Wheeling Central beat James Monroe 28-6. And I don't know if it says more about Wheeling Central or what it says about James Monroe, but both teams need a win. They're coming in 0-1, shady at James Monroe.
Yeah, and anytime you travel to Lynn side, no matter what that team record for James Monroe, the people come out. It's a community thing. As you said, it's a consolidation of two proud communities who formed to make James Monroe, and they've always been good. When Union was, when they had that school, they were good. And Shady better strap them up when they go to Lynn side.
Yeah, Peterstown and Union that make James Monroe. And then last but certainly not least, the game we'll have, Eric, we'll have Liberty at Pikeview, and Pikeview's coming off a loss. They lost to Summers County 15-7. They played that Thursday, so they have an extra day to prepare. One of the few places that you and I have been over the years that still has natural grass.
Yeah, and Pikeview, their facility's good, still natural turf, grass, but they keep it up. And it'll be interesting to see this game because Liberty scored 8 points, but they had chances in the red zone. They left a few points out there with their penalties and a couple of key turnovers. And I'm interested to see Summers County usually has a good scoring team. So if Pikeview's able to hold them to 15 points, this could be one of those games where turnover here, penalty there can decide the contest.
Well, you're so right. You look at Liberty, they scored 8, Pikeview scored 7. Each had 1 touchdown. So we think we're going to have a very competitive game.
We might have fireworks. They might have to replace the light bulbs on the school.
Yeah, that'll be good. Yeah, this podcast is brought to you by Modley's Plumbing and Heating. Whenever you need a plumber, call Modley's at 304-253-HELP. Well, we're going to jump into some of the big games this week in each class, and perhaps the biggest game in any class, Eric, this Friday night. Huntington travels to Martinsburg, and I think this is great that the coaches of Huntington are willing to take that long trip to play Martinsburg. Hopefully Martinsburg will return the favor next year, but these two teams, and I think if you ask anybody that follow high school football in West Virginia, these are the 2 elite programs in West Virginia, and I'm glad they're playing.
And if you ask anyone about both of these programs, the 2 coaches are bigger than the programs, really. You talk about Billy Seals for Huntington and Dave Walker for Martinsburg, who came, back to Martinsburg after leading Concord for a couple of years. So you're talking about 2 coaches not going to dodge anyone. And like you said, they expect to play this Friday and maybe meet at Charleston come early December.
Well, I think that everybody would agree the winner of this game is the best team in West Virginia, barring any class. Of course, this is the biggest class, and this ought to be a great game. The main thing is, what will the travel do? Because that's such a long trip from Huntington to Martinsburg.
Yeah, that's going from
one part of the state all the way to the other. Yeah.
So that will be interesting.
Also, a big battle in Mercer County, Princeton against Bluefield. Princeton coming off a big win against Capital. And Princeton really shined. The young man Jennings, who signed to go to Penn State, people told me that he had an outstanding game in that game. And you would expect that, signing to go to Penn State. And then Bluefield losing to Graham for the 3rd straight year and got shut out. So this game's at Bluefield. That ought to be a battle on Friday.
And I have to speak about a player for Princeton who we always talk about. He was kind of overshadowed by the State Player of the Year last year. And now he's got Jennings, who transferred in, who was a Penn State commit. Right. But I'm telling you, Markel Lowe, who had 114 yards rushing last week and 3 touchdowns. Not to be overlooked, but this guy can light it up. He's a tough runner inside, and once he gets out, it's Katie bar the door. He is gone.
Yeah, Bluefield's schedule really tough later. They got Greenbrier East. They got Beckley. They've got some really difficult games.
But it's nothing new to Bluefield. And guess what?
And they play Independence on
No one's going to feel sorry for Bluefield.
No, they don't. All right. We're also going to take a look in AAA Oak Hill and Riverside. That should be a nice game. Riverside lost to Greenbrier East. Oak Hill went to Nicholas County and got a win.
Yeah, and they went on the road to Nicholas County. I think they pulled out the victory 28-15.
I think so, yeah.
The new quarterback for Oak Hill, he shined. I think he threw for over 100 yards and rushed for 85 and really helped them to victory. But I think going on the road to Riverside, this would be a good test early in the season for the Oak Hill Red Devils.
Then in Class Single A, you look at Summers County getting that win on the road against Pikeview. They'll be back on the road against Greenbrier West, and West came up a little short at Pendleton County last week.
Yes, and I had a chance to talk to Coach Jared Robertson, who's the defensive coordinator for Greenbrier West. And I said, just a blank test, I said, what happened? He said, we ran into a real good quarterback and an outstanding wide receiver. And he said, but 27-21, we're driving, we're inside the red zone, and they fumble. So they feel with their young team, they could have pulled a victory out. Not to take anything from Pendleton County, but let's see how they rebound this week.
Yeah, I think West will be ready to play, and Summers County will give West its best shot. But West playing at home, coming off that loss, I think West is primed and ready for this game on Friday.
And Summers County and Greenbrier West, they've had some battles over the years.
All right, this segment brought to you in part by Modley's Plumbing and Heating. You need a plumber, you need Modley's 304-253-HELP. And boy, you don't know anything about a plumber until you need one. And when you need one, you got to know who to call. And easy to remember, 304-253-HELP for Modley's.
And they will show up.
Yes,
a lot
they
of
will.
plumbers won't.
Yes. All right, now we're going to switch gears to college football. We're going to talk about the game between West Virginia and Penn State. And, we haven't talked to each other since that game. So we're going to listen to our take, and that's why we talk about, you might agree with us, but we'll see. But first of all, let me get your take of Penn State's big win on Saturday.
My take is, don't panic, West Virginia fans. We just lost to a superior team, strong on the defensive front. Their linebackers didn't miss tackles, and their defensive backs covered. I mean, just a recipe for WVU pretty much had to play clean. They got an early turnover and turned it right back over. Played real messy, but typical of last year. I'm not going to give up on the team because they lost to a better team, a highly ranked team, and a lot of football left to play.
Well, my take was you're exactly right. Like when they got that early turnover.
You're supposed to disagree with me, man.
Well, well, maybe you might disagree with me. I'm not done yet. You might disagree with me as I start talking, but you're right. And I think anybody that follows football would know. If you're West Virginia and you are the underdog, you got to take advantage of that turnover deep in Penn State territory. And on correct me if I'm wrong, the very next play, right? The very next play, they turned the ball back over. Yeah. I think that really took the momentum. But I got to tell you, watching that game, this is what it was like for me. I'm 10 years older than you, so you were in diapers back in the early 70s. You weren't even born in 71. So watching Penn State beat West Virginia in the 70s, that's what that game reminded me on Saturday.
Okay.
And I'll say another thing. So I remember this when Bobby Bowden was the coach at West Virginia, and Penn State beat them all the time. And after one of the games, they asked Joe Paterno, they said, you've beaten West Virginia now so many years in a row. Do you think West Virginia's ever going to beat you? And Joe Paterno answered, not till they have better players than us. And I think you hit that was the key.
Yes.
Penn State had better players,
they did.
And that's why they won the game.
And I'm a West Virginia fan. Of course, I played at Marshall, but I'm a huge West Virginia fan. And I would ask all the fans out there, how many players for West Virginia would have started for Penn State? If you
not many.
And that's the key. And you look at the greatest coach in West Virginia history is, in my mind,
it's Don Nehlen. Yes.
His record against Penn State was atrocious.
Yeah, he only beat him twice in 84
and 88. And the times that he lost to him, so this is why I think Neil Brown is really on the trajectory just like Don Nehlen, because the two times that he lost to him when Penn State came in highly ranked, West Virginia didn't even score. So It was like a combined score of like 7. I looked it up. It was like 70-0.
Well, the overall record, Penn State has won 50, West Virginia has won 9 and 2 ties.
Yes.
And West Virginia hasn't beat Penn State, I think, since the early 60s.
Yes.
And I know they don't play every year. Now, they did when I was a kid in the late 60s into the 70s. They played every year, and Penn State won every year.
Okay, so you might not agree with me on this, and we'll close the book on this West Virginia one. Penn State will make the college.
Oh, no question. I will agree with you on that. I will agree
they
with you
will
on
make,
that.
and a lot of people that are jumping ship now for West Virginia and all that, they'll see, hey, that team is really good.
In fact, right now, I would think you probably would agree with this. The 3 Big Ten teams that I think will make it, they might have a 4th, but the 3 will be Ohio State, Oregon, and Penn State.
That's exactly
Southern
right.
Cal, the way they look, they could make it as well.
Yes,
but those first 3, I think there's more work to see of Southern Cal.
Yeah, Southern Cal's body of work. And Southern Cal, their schedule is tremendous.
Right.
They still have to go to your guy. I mean, it's tough.
So, it's real tough.
So we'll see.
All right, we got to talk about Marshall. Marshall got a big win last year at home. In fact, I think you were there against Virginia Tech. They played Virginia Tech at home. And Tech, Clark Lee, the coach at Vanderbilt, former Notre Dame assistant, really had Vanderbilt ready. My opinion, I really thought Tech was going to handle them. I thought Tech laid an egg, but congratulations to Vanderbilt. Now Virginia Tech comes home to take on Marshall. it's hard to get a read on Marshall. They beat Stony Brook 42-3, I believe it was.
Who?
Yeah, who? Stony Brook. By the way, Mike Dimrock, not Mike Dimrock, but Mike Elko, the coach of Texas A&M, he got his start at Stony Brook, by the way, a little coaching tree. But I really don't know what to expect. I saw the line was 16.5, Virginia Tech, and I know most people around the country may not know that much about Marshall. It'll be interesting to see that.
Yeah, and Marshall youth movement, a lot of young guys, and that we want to see how that travels, and I'm anxious to see. It's a big game for Marshall and a huge game for Virginia Tech, because those fans, if you think West Virginia fans were crying, for them to go on the road and lose to Vanderbilt, and no disrespect to that program, but the only good thing about Vanderbilt is it's in Nashville.
Yeah,
You can go see some good country music.
Well, they produce a lot of doctors at Vanderbilt. How about that?
We're talking about music and football.
Well,
here,
if you get sick of the music and the football, especially in Nashville, there's a lot of things you could get sick of.
Yeah.
You got good doctors to take care of.
Yeah, and that's true. But I really think Virginia Tech, it'll be tough for Marshall to go on the road and get a victory.
All right, the biggest game of the weekend at the Big House in Ann Arbor, over 105,000 will be there. Texas against defending national champion Michigan. I realize Michigan's not the same team as a year ago, but Michigan kind of struggled, and Texas looked really good in beating Colorado State.
Yeah, and that's going to make us drink that tea, right? Like, Texas is going to go in there and destroy them. And I think the line has gotten up to like
it's like 8. Yeah, it's 8 now.
8.
Yeah, it's pushed all the way to 8.
Poor Michigan. They only scored 30 points. They didn't look like the Michigan of old, because about 6 of those guys are playing pro football right now, and they lost their coach, to San Diego or Los Angeles.
Yeah, the Chargers. I still call them San Diego. Yeah.
But anyway, I think if Michigan, they're going to play sound defense, but Texas really looks the part, or they looked the part last Saturday.
Well, I will say this. Texas isn't back until they're back. And you hear that all the time. Texas is back, and I say they're not back until they're back, and I haven't seen that yet.
Yeah, and then we've had a couple of players anoint them. We're back, and yes, where are they? But the move to the SEC, is really going to they're going to have to really elevate their game week in and week out.
All right, before we close this segment, I got one thing I got to run this by you and see what your take is. And I'll tell you, my biggest take of the weekend, Miami looked really good in the beatdown of Florida, and Cam Ward played really good. But here's my biggest take, and maybe you paid attention to this, maybe you didn't. As I'm watching the game, Mertz is quarterback, Grant Mertz is quarterback for Florida, who I don't think is very good. And I said, how in the hell do they let him wear number 15, which is Tim Tebow's number, in my opinion, one of the 10 best college football players of all time? How in the hell do they let somebody as bad as Graham Mertz wear his number in that game?
Yeah, and you think that number was up on the shelf, retired, put away, never to be worn again?
Yes, never to be worn again. But I mean, it's one thing if you've got an okay quarterback or good quarterback but when you got a quarterback as bad as they have wearing Tim Tebow's number, that was my biggest takeaway of the entire college weekend.
Well, if you know anything about Tim Tebow, he probably gave him his blessings.
Well, I met Tim Tebow, and he may have. But anyway, now that that's done, we get past that. We'll get to our last segment, the National Football League. And it's brought to you by Modley's Plumbing and Heating. 304-253-HELP. And boy, you'll really need help if you got to call a plumber. And they're the ones that can help you out. All right, the National Football League. Where do we start? The first game of the season, the defending champion Kansas City Chiefs against the Baltimore Ravens, 2 Super Bowl favorites. And I saw this stat. The Chiefs are at 12% is their chance by I don't know what analytics they use to three-peat to win the Super Bowl game.
Yeah, and that is so tough to do. A lot of great teams in the 90s, the 80s, and the 70s.
Patriots never done as good as they were. Steelers,
you're
Cowboys.
Talking about dynasties,
yes.
And it's just so hard
49ers
to do.
in the day.
But if there's anyone who could do it at this day and age, I have Andy Reid. I don't know what kind of pixie dust he has in his pocket, but he seems to lose top players. Lost, Tyreek Hill.
Right.
What are they going to do?
Turn around
win the Super Bowl. Anytime they lose someone, they draft well, and they lost their best defensive player other than Jones, their defensive back, and they'll retool it, but it's still going to be hard for them to repeat.
Well, as long as you got 15, Patrick Mahomes, a healthy Mahomes, and you got Kelsey, as long as you got those two, you always got a chance.
Yeah, you have the key ingredients to the pot roast, right?
Yeah.
Hey, pot roast, you need the potatoes and the
You got to have
carrots.
that. Yeah.
That's the only thing.
You ain't baking the cake without yeast. They're the yeast, right?
That's correct.
That's what I said. You ain't baking no cake without that. On Friday, they have a pro game, which is in Brazil, and neither team wanted to play it. Green Bay and Philadelphia. And to me, that's a real toss-up because I don't know how far that is. I don't know the time difference, but that's got to be, to me, with no home field, I would think the underdog might be the team to take in that in Green Bay, but you just don't know how that's going to play out.
Yeah, you don't really know. I've heard several Philadelphia Eagle players say they're not going to even leave the hotel.
Yeah.
They're just going to go play their video game, go play the game, and get the heck back on a 9-hour flight.
All right, we got to get down to a couple more NFL things. One of the things I'll point out, I think the wrong team's favored between the Giants and the Vikings. The Vikings are 1.5 favorite on the road. I think the Giants should be favored.
Yeah, and the Giants they've retooled. They lost their Saquon Barkley to the Eagles, but when teams and everyone counts them out, I think this could be the year that the Giants bounce back. I'm not going to say they're going to win the division because that's a tough division, and with the Washington Commanders, drafting well and getting half of the Dallas Cowboys on their squad, so they'll play a better defense this year.
Well, speaking of Dallas, I think that's the biggest game on Sunday, and you'll be there. Dallas at Cleveland, and that should be one heck of a game because neither Dak Prescott or Watson played any in the preseason.
Yeah, none in the preseason, but those veterans like that, you don't need a lot of reps in the preseason. The offense, let's just get out there, kick it off, and let's go.
The one thing that I find intriguing about that game, and I've been watching it, the total's been coming down. It's down to like 42.
Yeah,
it started at
41.5.
47. Yeah,
Yes.
it keeps lowering every week. They think maybe a defensive struggle.
Well, both teams, and I was going to say this, if you could pluck one player off of both teams, if you just had a draft of both teams, I think 2 defensive players would go first.
Right, I would agree with
Garrett
that.
for Cleveland,
and Parsons
yes,
for Dallas. I would agree with that.
So that tells you those guys are game wreckers, and I think the Dallas Cowboys with 2 rookie linemen, a center and a tackle, they might be in for a rude awakening. It's going to be tough sledding on the ground, and Dak may have to stay in shotgun just to keep Myles Garrett at bay.
And then Monday night's a big game as Aaron Rodgers takes the Jets to the 49ers. The 49ers now have opened their wallet. They've signed Williams. They got him back. IU, the receiver. They got Purdy. McCaffrey's ready to go. That should be a great game on Monday night.
Yeah, and I think if you want to get rid of the national debt, you need to sign the guy that cooks the books for the 49ers. Because I don't see, where does he find all this money? I mean, he takes from here, restructures there, and there they go. They have the top 3 highest paid running back, 4 to 5 top 2 receivers on their payroll, and a top paid tackle.
Okay, our final segment.
Okay, we got a new segment for you folks. Whoever listened to this podcast or watched it last week, you could have heard our barking dog. That is my main man, Tuck. So we got this NFL segment's called the Dog of the Week in honor of him, since we had to ship him off for this segment.
All right, so you want me to go first or you go first?
I'll let you go first.
All right, believe it or not, I think the Dallas Cowboys is my Dog of the Week. I think, they're getting, that line has been all over the place. It started at 1, but I think they win the game straight up. I think Dallas is my barking Dog of the Week.
And so here's mine. It's growling. The Pittsburgh Steelers on the road at Atlanta. Mike Tomlin getting 3 points. Defense travels. I say that all the time. TJ Watt, look for him to wreck shop, and the Steelers get away with a victory on the road.
Well, this has been episode 2 of You May Not Agree With Us, and it's been brought to you by Modley's Plumbing and Heating. You can dial up Modley's at 304-253-HELP. So for your dog Tuck, for Regina Thomas, who was produced and direct this, for you, Eric, I'm Maris. Any final words?
No. Just check out the Friday Night Light.
Have a great evening.